Hello and welcome. I'm just going to invite Ruth as my co-host to let her in. Hopefully she can now speak. And I will invite her to co-host as well. Ooh.
Good evening, Elizabeth.
Hello there, Ruth. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm just sending you an invite to co-host, so hopefully you'll get that in a minute, just in case anything goes wrong. Welcome this evening to our first Library Staff Love Learning Twitter Spaces chat. We had a break over Easter. I hope you all had a lovely Easter and had a restful time. We're back here today to talk about the school librarian's role in author visits, and it's something that over the years working at with SLS Guernsey, I was quite heavily involved with. I think it's an interesting topic because I think we are, as librarians, have a real opportunity to engage with an author visiting a school. I think there are times when it works absolutely brilliantly, and there are other times when it is less so. So we're going to talk this evening just about the whys and wherefores, the ideas that we've had, how it's gone for us. We hope that you'd like to join in. If you want to tell us about a visiting author, or you are an author and you'd like to join in, I can see that we have Anne Bryant with us this evening, a wonderful author that I have worked with. If any of you fancy joining in the chat this evening, then please just send us a request to speak. You are more than welcome. Ruth Maloney is my co-host this evening. Ruth and I have worked together for a few years, well, for over a year now on this Twitter Spaces chat. She is a school librarian, slightly different role from me. I'm a trainer and advisor. She's actually working in a school library. So, you can either listen to Ruth and I talk for the next half hour, or you can join in with this chat. So, Ruth, apart from having a great Easter, I hope you have, author visits, is it something that you have been heavily involved with?
Yeah, we've in my budget there is an author visit for every year, and every year I sort of panic about it because we've had such mixed success. We had the first year I was there, we had a local author who was in some way connected to the school, who volunteered, and he came along. Nobody read his books. Nobody has really read his books since. It wasn't really the right writing style for our students, but he gave a great presentation and everybody sat through and all fine. And I thought, well, that was all very interesting, but not particularly, useful. Then we had an interaction with a publisher who were offering a free talk in exchange for book sales. And that was possibly the most complicated and the messiest thing I've done in school libraries. And I don't know what anybody else feels about that, but that was such a disaster. I would never touch it again.
Was that a book tour?
Yeah, yeah, I suppose it was. It was, related to the release of a new book, which actually I didn't rate anyway, but I didn't know that until
I think you do have to be very careful with those, because I can't remember who it was, but we had a great author. It's like I couldn't believe that we were so lucky to get her for free. And it was very well received. But I think, yeah, if it's an unknown author, it could be quite difficult, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, she was a known author. I just didn't rate that book, but it was the organization of, it was kind of dependent on sales. Well, I can't sell the book in advance, particularly. The kids either want to buy it or they don't. And usually what happens is they hear the author talk and then they want to buy the book. Well,
Absolutely.
they wanted pre-sales of the book, and we'd got tied up with a local independent bookseller, which is great, to organize it. But they were saying, well, how many copies do you want? So I'd ask the students in advance, and of course that's absolutely hopeless because they say yes, their parents say yes, but they never actually get the money in or blah, blah, blah. It was just a disaster. And in the end, the publishers pulled out and said, "Yeah, the sales aren't good enough. We're not coming."
Okay, so that's really difficult. I think there are different levels of that, but rather than just about sales, the individual author that arrives in a school is a different scenario, isn't it, Ruth? Um, I've got Anne Bryant, who is a good friend of mine and author, and she is on this evening. I just wonder if you'd say hello and introduce yourself a little bit, Anne, first. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, hello, and hi everybody. Yes, I worked with Elizabeth for 3 years. I had a tenure, I think you would call it, in the bailiwick of Guernsey, and so I visited all the primary schools and even a couple of the secondary schools actually. And those were fabulous visits because I was able to have follow up. And that's the thing that an author doesn't usually get. When we go into schools, we normally go in isolation, do presentations or workshops or whatever, sell books, perhaps. I'll come to that in a moment, and then leave and never see those children again. I'm always really keen to do follow up because it feels like a much more fulfilling experience, both for me and for the schools and the teachers. And on those occasions when schools have wanted me to do follow up, that has really worked well. Also, lots of communication beforehand. So for this reason, I prefer liaising with librarians than with any other person in the school. So, for example, sometimes it's the head of literature or literacy or something like that who contacts you. But when it's the librarian, I know that they've got a complete overview of the school and they're really sure of what books the children like to read, and they've looked at my profile online and they know that I can do presentations and things. So what I was going to say about the books and the selling of books, I think yes, it is a very complicated thing, and I tend to not have that as my main thing. It's absolutely definitely not my starting point. So my starting point is doing author presentations, trying to let the children learn about what it is like to be an author. So along the way, all sorts of literacy initiatives and that kind of thing. But they meet an actual author, which seems to be the thing which they want to do most of all. Then the book sale, if the school wants one, and maybe they don't, and I'm very happy with that, is an added extra. And normally if they want one, then they're really good at it. For example, I was recently at a school in Gillingham, Woodlands Primary, and the lovely Amy Costadel, librarian there, was absolutely brilliant. She had set everything up perfectly beforehand. All the presentations were completely on time. Everybody filed in on time. It was all lovely. Um, I left them with a bit of follow up, and then she escorted me to the library where she had completely organised the signing session, and all that went very well too. So there was a buzz all day long. I should stop now. I've said a lot.
Thanks, Anne. It is. I think that you've captured that the importance of good organisation, but also connecting with an author before you actually book them, and actually really understanding what their audience is, what type of books they read, what kind of presentations they're likely to do, who they're happy to work with. I've worked with a few authors that were working in our primary schools but didn't want to have the reception children there. This is the difficult thing to find out when the author suddenly arrives. This is all the kind of things that you actually need to engage with and ensure is ready
Exactly. Yeah.
before it comes.
Yes, sorry, I was just going to say that all that pre-talk is really useful so that from the author's point of view, we can say, no, sorry, we don't for example, do 7 talks a day and slotting into the prescribed periods of the school timetable. Some authors like to do 3, some like to do 4. And we can say whether or not they're active or interactive, you know, if we need a lot of space, if we need to have projector and screen, if we need music, all that kind of thing. And along with all that conversation comes a lot more understanding from the librarian's point of view as well, and a lot more excitement too, as they sort of see, oh, it's going to be like this, and then they pass it on to the teachers, and the teachers, oh, great, it's going to be like this, and they find themselves doing a little bit of preparation as well, and all of that makes for the best possible school visit.
Absolutely. I think it's so true. For me as a librarian, making sure that beyond that author visit, there is something more, something to keep the excitement going, and actually that connections, especially with the English teacher, if that's, because sometimes it's science teachers. I had a great an author who wrote science type books, and actually the science department were the people that were the most interested, but having that hook that allows you to continue the experience beyond the author visit was hugely important. Is there something, Anne, that you think that you particularly would recommend somebody doing in order to make sure, or to find out what kind of things can be done afterwards?
Well, usually my presentations themselves, the presentations / workshops, because they're so interactive, I'm never quite sure what to call them, but I don't do actual creative writing, sit down with pen and paper in the classroom. Mine are all in the hall, and they are much more interactive and active, and with a musical and dramatic element as well. But for example, when I home in with years 1 and 2 on my book Peter and the Timberwolf, I often put the music on with that, and mine is just a very modern take on that. And the existing traditional story, actually written by Prokofiev, has got a fairly unsatisfactory ending. So that's the perfect means for me to start bringing about a new ending. And the last picture in the book, I didn't ask the illustrator to do this, but the illustrator has another wolf as well as the actual wolf of Peter and the Wolf. And this other wolf is looking sort of quite admiringly at our wolf. So I say to the children, oh, look at the way she's looking. I think they're going to get, and all the children go, married. And then I say, yeah, and I think they're going to have a baby. Yes. So then I do a whole big thing on alliteration where it's called wolf. So what name shall we give it? It's got to begin with W, and a whole process of elimination thing of W names, followed by an adjective which will go in the middle. So we finish with things like Wilbur the wise wolf, or it could be much, much less obvious than that, with things like Washington the wiggly wolf. And each time they give me something, I quickly spin a story about this particular wolf, and then leave the teachers with the idea that they can do that same thing with the letter C, for example, and it could be Cuthbert the cooking caterpillar. And they've had a lot of imaginative exploration with the wolf idea, which will lend itself to either verbal or written stories for the caterpillar idea, or for whatever letter they decide to do. And then I say, I'd love to see those stories. And they often send me the selection of stories, and I can just, I don't charge for that. I just like to have that interaction afterwards.
That's fantastic. Ruth, can I bring you back in? Anne, can I just get you to mute yourself, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Have you had many authors that do the type of thing that Anne is talking about? Obviously, Anne mainly deals with primary and lower secondary, but author visits for you, Ruth, what do you think?
We've not had anything as interactive as that, and I think that's probably in the nature of being a secondary school, partly in the nature of being a secondary school, and partly in the nature of the kinds of authors we've chosen. Most recently, we had a fantastic virtual visit from Dan Abnett, who is a Marvel graphic novelist. And he was part of our World Book Day, World Book Week celebration. And he gave a very simple, online hour-long presentation in which he talked to a selected group of students. One of the things I find very, very difficult with author visits is that I might spend £300 or £400 or £500 on an author, and the school expects that to meet the whole school's requirements. They expect every year group to be able to benefit from that. And one of the lovely things about Dan coming was, we didn't pay him. He volunteered his time free of charge. But because he was going to be online and because we weren't paying him, I felt I could say it's open to a selected number of students. The first 60 kids can come in the library and hear him speak. That meant that his talk was suitable, was relevant to those kids. And he was absolutely brilliant talking about follow-up. He set a competition for the students to write about or to create or to draw a graphic novel, the script for a graphic novel, a character. It was really open competition. And we had 12 amazingly diverse entries. I sent them to him and he commented on each and every individual one in detail. It was brilliant. And the buzz that the kids got from that was huge. So it wasn't interactive in that way. I mean, they would be mortified, most students, if I said, right, come on, this author's going to have you up and dancing and there'll be music and you'll be expected, it's just not that vibe, much as I would love that. But it was interactive it was engaging, I think, in a different way. So yeah, it's different strokes for different folks, really.
Absolutely, I'd agree. And I think your audience, is exactly what we were talking about before. Is that knowing and understanding who the author's coming in to see, the age of the children, even the different areas of where the school might be, for example, could affect. I know that some inner city schools love people, and of course I can't think of the author's name off the top of my head, but gritty writers are needed in those schools, and I think that that is really important as far as librarians are concerned. Their knowledge and understanding of the books that are well read and within a school setting is an important selection process, isn't it, when you begin to look for authors to come and visit.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the interesting things was that we had an author visit from somebody who I had canvassed quite a lot of opinion of on SLN or locally, and had great reviews. And other schools I've since spoken to and said, oh yeah, we had a fantastic visit with her. And she was not a success in our school because, in my opinion, she hadn't done her homework about us. And so the kids felt that she was talking down to them, and it became very apparent that she hadn't pitched it correctly for us. And that was that was a lesson for me in really being braver about knowing that what our kids are about, and not just thinking, oh, well, everybody else said she was great and I'm sure it'll be okay, looks all right on paper. Actually thinking, but they don't read her books. And I know they don't read her books. And, why that is, I don't know. But I think I've learned that lesson the hard way. We won't have anybody now, unless they're coming free of charge, who I don't know the kids really are going to enjoy. At the moment, they're all desperate for me to get Alice Osman.
Okay, so it's difficult, isn't it? So we're not talking about taking authors for nothing. We're talking about those authors that are offering to come, that don't charge, that you don't necessarily know much about. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't dream of suggesting that all authors should do it for free at all. I'm very happy to pay, but the only circumstance in which I would have an author in school now who I know the kids aren't really interested and engaged with is if that author was visiting, was offering that free of charge. And that I think often seems to me to be the more newly establishing, the authors who are finding their feet. And that's not to say that, every school to its own, and no doubt, authors that we haven't had such success with have been brilliant elsewhere. It's just too risky, and I felt it reflected very badly on the library, actually.
Do you think a lot of that is to do with the homework that the librarian or the person that's organising the visit is doing? So like you said, Ruth, it's very easy to accept the fact that other schools have taken and enjoyed a visiting author, and without really understanding what they're going to come and do in your school, you take them on face value, I suppose it is, isn't it? And that's generally when it goes pear-shaped. It's that part of it's that opportunity to actually, engage with the author first if they're not too busy, and to understand what it is that they're bringing to the school. So it's as much for the author as it is for the school itself, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, I don't know what happened in that particular case, because we had done our homework, but we had long conversations about what was going to be delivered. You know, it was the pitching of what was delivered. She delivered what she said she would, but not at the level that was suitable. She was asking our sixth form students if they understood about the House of Lords and the House of Parliament, basic divisions in British politics, which no doubt in some schools those sorts of questions would be useful and appropriate, but they didn't go down well with ours. And I think, I don't know where the miscommunication was, but I agree, and I think I had felt I'd put the effort into working out what could be done, because it was one of those occasions where I was trying to make that visit fit lots and lots of year groups. So there was differentiation, what was delivered to the younger year groups and what was delivered to the more senior students. But somehow or other we didn't get it right, and I felt it was my over reliance on the opinions of other schools.
It's interesting, isn't it? Now I can see that there's lots of lovely librarians on this chat this evening. If any of you want to join in and tell us about an author visit that you've had, positives, hopefully, we'd love to hear from you. The more the merrier. If you have a story about how you invited an author and it did or it didn't work, would be great. What you did to plan it, how is it planned? Is the teachers really involved, or as you as a librarian, are you the main forerunner? Is it like Ruth says, you're expected to spend your budget and actually get access to every child in the school from a day visit from an author? And as Anne said, you know, doing 2 or 3 presentations in a day is probably more than enough. I know that we worked Anne to the bone when she visited us. So if you've got something to say and like to join in, please just ask. You need to press the button that says request to speak, and we will invite you in. Go on, sorry.
I'll just add something. One of the real successes that we've had actually is less with our individual school visits and more with the local book awards that we run every year, where we usually try and get 2 authors live, and we're sharing that. There are sort of 15 schools involved. So that's paid for in a slightly separate way, but the benefit from that, the knock-on benefit, I think, is actually larger. And we had talked amongst, when that happened, that event this year happened at the end of March. One of those authors was brilliant, and we had talked about whether we could organise something locally where that author came and visited 3 or 4 local schools in the same day, and we combined the fee, but so the same presentation was given to 3 or 4 schools. In that way, hoping to get maybe more authors into the school in a school year, and more students able to see the author. So I'm interested to know if anybody else has done that, whether they've managed to combine their author visits without a school library service organising it for you.
Yeah, well, I was just going to jump in and say that we had so the first time I met Anne was during Book Week. So in Book Week we had we invite 3 authors over to Guernsey and we get them into every single school. That's sorry, I'm just going to accept somebody. Good, Susie is now accepted. That's all right. Let me just finish what I was saying. So the 3 authors would then go into every school, and that was paid for by Schools Library Service. So the schools access that free. Now, like Ruth has just said, Schools Library Service doesn't exist everywhere, and they don't all offer that service. But Guernsey has got a literary festival, and the schools managed to tap into that and get some author visits. So there were some children's authors that came along that were presenting as part of the literary festival, but obviously during the day they didn't have an audience because all the children were at school. So the authors were taken into the schools, and I think that worked well. And I think it's about looking out for other opportunities, which is really important. Can I bring Susie in? Hi, Susie, how are you?
Hello, everybody. I'm fine, thank you. I'm sorry if I missed the beginning, so apologies if what I'm saying is repetitive, but I was sort of really relating to what Ruth was saying about combining author events with different schools. An experience that I have with that was at a prep school that I worked in, where we had Chris, I can't remember, he wrote the Bodyguard series, and he was absolutely fantastic. And we invited the local school in. And what we noticed, and what the students noticed, is for the local school, it was a really big thing. Whereas our prep school, they were pretty lucky, and they all got an author event for each year group. And I noticed that the students that did come to that event had really prepared, and they had some really good questions for him, and it almost put our own students slightly on the back foot and made them think, actually, yeah, no, that's a really good question, and I think it engaged our own students better because it focused them almost like it was a challenge.
So just explain, Susie, how what it is that you're set up. You're in a private school, and from what I think you're saying is that you
at that time, yes. I mean, this is a while ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a private prep school, and I was lucky enough to organise an author. I mean, this is a long time ago, before COVID and all that stuff. So each year group got an author or a book event of some description. But this one particular event that I'm thinking of, we invited the local school of the same age group to join. And they were just really focused, and they were really excited about it. And I just think it did create a really good atmosphere, really focused all the students to listen to the author. When there was possibly some sort of hesitation, slight sort of, oh, this isn't very cool, do I have to sit and listen to this author, sort of thing. It sort of pulled them in, I think. So that's one experience I had. And the other one was the Henley Lit Fest, where we took students to the literary festival. And again, there are lots of other schools of those. And again, you've got all the different children, and some children are really focused and they're asking really relevant questions. And I think it makes your own students think, oh, hold on a minute, yeah, they are really engaged. And I did notice that sort of I think that it created a much better environment, actually.
Do you think you have to organise questions before an author visit comes? It's just made me think about it, is the fact that preparation we were talking about preparation in lots of different ways, but actually preparation of the students in advance of an author visit is hugely important, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I think absolutely vital. I mean, when I I haven't done this for a while, actually, but when I do them, there's I do lots of work around marketing that person, and not only to the students but to the parents. So building up the reason why we've got that particular author and the benefits to their particular children, and why and I'm trying to boost, to be honest, boosting book sales, but it's also making what I have in the library relevant so that they all want to borrow it. And that's, it's the sort of the child walking down the corridor reading their book, sort of hardly noticing anyone else around them. That's what I want to see. You know, I don't want to fall downstairs, but I just, you know, that's what I absolutely love seeing, when they're all so engrossed in the event that, you know, when they actually see the author, it's almost like going to a concert or something.
Absolutely, it's when they get so excited. Come on in, Ruth. I keep interrupting you.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's exactly right, and I would really agree that the presence of other students makes a huge difference. I mean, just as it does to all sorts of things, they are different, and also if you're taking students to a literary festival, most likely you've selected, or those students have selected themselves, rather than taking a whole cohort. I think one of the very difficult things, and it must be very difficult as an author, is to speak to a whole year group, particularly in secondary school, where there is a sort of too cool for school feeling amongst some of them. You know, however engaging the author is, plenty of them think that they would rather be doing something else. But I really like that that shared atmosphere, that idea that, you know, regardless of which school you are from or at, that you are all taking pleasure, and that you do encourage, the students do encourage each other's interest, and there is a rise to the challenge of, you know, asking more interesting questions. But going back to Anne's point, then it's very difficult to get that follow up, I think. So yeah, you know, that's a balance, I suppose, to find.
Can I just say something? I think that on questions and answers, I didn't used to like questions and answers at all, because most kids tend to ask the same questions and nobody listened to the answers anyway, until I went to a school in New Zealand where it was great, because they spent such a lot of time as a class in devising just 5, or maybe it was just 4, I can't remember, questions, but they'd worked on it so much. And the teacher I spoke with him at length afterwards, and he said, you know, I just got rid of all the silly questions and said, do you really think that you want to know the answer to that? Are you really going to listen if Anne says that? And in the end, he'd put them all into teams in the class. And they devised these questions, and they were so interested in hearing the answers, because they'd all worked out what answers they thought I would give. And they were really original questions, like, have you ever written a book that made you cry when you were writing it? And things like this. So they got to learn quite a lot of anecdotal stuff about me. And they were really interested in that. But there was a big whoop that went up every time I gave an answer where one of the team had said, yeah, I bet she'll say that. And so they were sort of taking scores and really interested in that. So that's what I wanted to say about question and answer sessions. I think a lot of prep can be done on that, but class prep, not just individual children. Of course, the individual children can feed into that, but have some class discussion about it. And as far as teaching, you know, talking to a whole year group is concerned, I like to do that. I like to put all the reception kids together, all the years and ones and twos together, threes and fours together, fives and sixes together, no matter how many. With reception, I have to have smaller numbers, because it is very, very active and we need all the space around. But it's not every author who can do presenting or is keen on it or wants to do it, and some of them force themselves into a space, and I'm happy, because I've done a lot of it, and the more I've done, the better I've got at it. So my advice would be, you know, I feel like I can read the children. You know, Ruth, you were saying quite a bit about that. I might be hopeless at secondary level, but at primary school level, I feel like I can read the children fairly soon on and adapt, be flexible, change what I was going to say. So that's what I wanted to say on that.
That sounds, I mean, brilliant. And I love the idea of them having engaged with the book so much in class in advance that they've got the opportunity to really think about those questions. And I think maybe, I don't know whether that's harder generally in secondaries or not. I think I don't know whether I've only worked with this school in this way, with the school I'm currently at, and it's a very academic school. I don't know whether we're trying to achieve things from the author visit that maybe other schools aren't trying to achieve. The school is always aiming at more than just a reading for pleasure experience, I think. But yet we don't have that engagement. I haven't yet got to the point where I've managed to fit the author neatly into the curriculum of whatever each year group is studying. But there is that sort of drive. But I love that idea that the kids would have all sat there in a group beforehand and really worked hard to think about the questions that they actually wanted the answer to. Because I agree, and we've had questions for all the visits before, and I've thought, really, of all the things you could have asked about anything, the best questions are the ones that are completely almost unrelated to the book or the story, and just give you an insight into the author or the way that they think about their writing, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Slightly off topic in the fact that, with virtual author visits, pre-COVID, funnily enough, I had Caroline Lawrence agreed to join me on a Padlet. So if anybody doesn't know what a Padlet is, it's an online post-it board, and basically my book group had read one of Caroline's books, and I had encouraged them that we could have a question and answer session with Caroline. I happened to tell her when we were going to be on Padlet, and she came on without me knowing at the same time, and it was fascinating. The reason I'm telling you this story is because of the questions that they were asking at the beginning before they realized that she was going to be on there were so different when she actually appeared, and the transformation and understanding of the types of questions that they could ask her it blossomed. So I think it was an impromptu thing. It was a group that were mainly engaged in the book that we had been reading, but actually the good deep questions made the session and the book reading so much better. And actually, if we can engage our students with thinking about those questions first, it could make a huge difference. I wonder if there's any teachers listening tonight that have had author visits, and what their engagement is with the teacher and with the librarian and the author. Is it something that you can, as a teacher, need to engage with a bit more? Rather than the librarian is organising a visit. Oh, that's great. I've now got to give up an hour of my English lesson. Is it something that teachers, I wonder, want to engage with more but just don't have time, or whether it doesn't link with the curriculum, like Ruth said? It's interesting. Maybe that's a conversation for another night when we maybe have some more teachers on.
Elizabeth, sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's an interesting question actually, about whether anybody ever invites non-fiction writers. We have tried. I know one of the other teachers in school is building an In Conversation With program, and they have tried to get Hannah Fry, who's a mathematician, and we've had various non-fiction, sort of non-fiction speakers. We've had various speakers in who are not necessarily authors but tend to be academics. But I've never tried, and I've never been asked to get any non-fiction authors in, and I don't really hear about it happening, but that may just be my inexperience. So it'd be interesting to see whether anybody has had any success with that, or whether that tends to be organised by the departments rather than by the library.
It's interesting. We in Guernsey, we had non-fiction, but it tended to be older, and it tended to be through the literary festival. So, funnily enough, non-fiction author, there was a mathematician who came in and spoke to our sixth form. We've had illustrators and poets, which is slightly different from the traditional author. But I think, it needs to be something that is organised and requested by the teaching staff, I would assume. Let me bring Susie back in.
Hi. Yeah, just on the non-fiction side, our school are very active on that, and I think each department have some budget to have a speaker. Recently we had Maggie Alfonsi, who is a female rugby player, and that was to then follow on to an opportunity for the students to try out disabled rugby, so in wheelchairs, and that was an amazing event. And that was and Maggie Alfonsi was brilliant, and she gave all the end of term sports prizes as well. So that was really, really good. She was really inspirational and really motivated. You know, even I thought I could play rugby at the end of that. So she was really good. And the other person we had recently was a guy called Emmanuel Jal, who was a child soldier in I can't remember where it was, but he was also amazing about saying anyone can do anything. And he sort of came out of all that and became a rap artist, and now he's doing talks to schools about how you can effectively do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it. And you know, he tells various levels of his experience depending on his audience. So he had one with prep and he had one with secondary, and the secondary one was much more detailed and quite brutal at times.
Did you organise that?
Sorry?
Did you organise that?
No. So this is the departments. So that would have been, actually, that was the headmistress who got hold of him. So various different departments. We've got, at the moment, we're doing a diversity drive. So we've got a whole diversity team, and I'm leading that at the moment while the head of that, who's head of art, is on maternity leave. So we've got a huge amount of events going on to show diversity across all the pieces, you know, race, religion, disability, orientation, everything like that. So we've also had a non-binary speaker. So yeah, we're very lucky to have all those experiences.
Fantastic. Can I just welcome Deborah to the chat? I hope you're well, Deborah. Thanks for joining.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say, talking about a non-fiction author, because there is a difference, isn't there, between those motivational speakers that Susie was referencing, and we have some, although probably not quite as many, being a state school with a slightly lesser budget. But we do have those type of speakers in, but that's nothing to do with the library or the English faculty. But I am keen to get a non-fiction author in. Actually, it's Kath Senker. She writes a lot of non-fiction from both primary through secondary and actually right up to university level, and she writes across a whole range of themes, and some are historical, some are current day, some are political, some are much more factual in terms of, like, there might be geographical books. And she lives just down the road, and coincidentally my dad knows her dad, so she'd be very easy to book. But what I'm concerned about, and I think the thing that's holding me back before I even talk to her, is when you get a fiction speaker in, you know, they're passionate about their book, they love their characters, that's that story that drives them. But I would like to get a non-fiction author in, but I'm just not sure that there's going to be, she'll be passionate about her subjects, but when it's somebody who writes across as many subjects, which a lot of non-fiction authors do, you know, they don't just necessarily write about one area of non-fiction, is it going to have the same captivating experience for the children. We start, as I say, I'm a state secondary school librarian, and the system I inherited, and I've actually kept going, is that we have an author in for the whole of year 7. To speak to the whole of year 7, and then do some writers' workshops or whatever workshops that person offers, whatever their skills are best at, for a day, and I choose when that's going to be. And then I try and sort of get smaller events with less cost of an author for years 8 and 9. I'm not allowed to do it for years 10 and 11. It's seen as too disruptive, unfortunately. But yeah, so I think that's my thing with non-fiction, as opposed to like a motivational speaker. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on if they've had a non-fiction author.
I'm just going to jump in before I invite Susie back in. I think it goes down. It was something that Anne said, that just because people write books doesn't make them good presenters. And I think the same is probably with non-fiction authors as well as fiction authors. They are, non-fiction authors are very passionate about their topic. I think it's probably, you're going to get some good ones and you're going to get some bad ones. That's my thought on it anyway. I'm going to bring Susie back in.
Sorry. Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, it's a really good point. I just did want to say that Emmanuel Jal has written a fascinating book about his life. Maggie Alfonsi, I'm not sure about. And then there's another someone else called Elizabeth Day who has written lots of books about failure. But yeah, it's a really good point that they're not necessarily authors.
So I think we are probably, well, I've just noticed the time, it's 1:45. We've gone on 15 minutes longer than I was planning, but it was such a good topic, I didn't want to stop us. I am going to bring this evening to a close. I want to thank you all very much for listening in and joining us, especially to Anne for giving us your time. It's, we need to catch up for a get together and a catch up and a coffee at some point, Anne. But it's been lovely. It's been lovely to have you with us this evening. Thanks for the others, Deborah and Susie, that joined in tonight, and my co-host, Ruth. I want to just highlight that we are meeting again on the 9th of May, and we're going to talk about reflective practice. A little bit more serious a topic, I suppose, than lovely author visits, but it's something that I think is really important for school librarians, especially the fact that, we teach lessons, we invite authors in. How do we then reflect and decide what went well and what didn't? We have the lovely Susan, who's actually on tonight, is going to talk about the blog post that she wrote for me. So if you want to just check out my website, elizabethahutchinson.com, check out the blog written by Susan about reflective practice, and join us on the 9th of May. You'll be very welcome to join us. Thank you very much for this evening. Take care. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Bye. Thank you.